Plessis plus Israel Adesanya. My partners DraftKings got this thing listed. Adesanya is officially the favorite. It's minus 130, Dricus plus 110. Now, if you're ever given a prediction for the fight, like, the boys know who's going to win. The boys always know who's going to win. Every rare occasion, an athlete will go out and he'll perform outside of his level. He'll perform out of his gloves. I'll give you a great example, but nobody was more surprised that Justin Gaethje beat Tony Ferguson than Justin Gaethje. That's the truth. In that moment, Justin was not what he felt prepared to fight. It was a shorter notice. Tony was on top of his game. I'm just sharing with you. Goes out there and wins every single round. Everybody sits back and goes, wow, that was incredible. But no one was more surprised than Justin. And I give you that because when you're trying to handicap these things, the press conference is very important. The face-off is wildly important. The body language is super important because both guys are going to learn to be very good actors. They're not only trying to convince the other person, they're not only largely trying to convince you, the viewing audience, they're trying to convince themselves. And the guy that would win the fight, or that they both athletes believe are going to win the fight, the day they sign a bout agreement can change by the time the press conference rolls around, and it can change yet again by the time the fight rolls around. So I'm always trying to guess. And if they ever let you know, if somebody has a tell that lets you know they don't believe that winner is going to be them, we can pick right up on it. And the reason I go to that, Dricus let us know he didn't think it was going to be him. The first time they were going to fight, the fight was agreed to. The number one contenders match had taken place. Izzy had flown in from a different continent to sit in the front row to get into the ring to have a face-off with what would be his opponent. And it might have been Whitaker, and it might have been DDP. But the run of show isn't going to change. Izzy, sit here. When the fight ends and Bruce Buffer says these words, go up the stairs and face off, right? I mean, it's one of these things where it could have been Whitaker and it could have been DDP. In that case, it was DDP and there's Adesanya. And DDP did not do the fight. In fact, everything that he had said leading into this fight and how badly he wanted it, it was gone. He not only didn't take the fight, he wasn't shy about it. He wasn't shy in the least about saying, I become number one contender. I'm almost as good as I told you all, right? I've told you guys I was the best. Well, now I've made it to the next best thing, and I'm not going. We'll do it another time. He never really gave a full account. Like, it wasn't a well-planned alibi. Well, I made my shoulder, or I got the cracked ribs, or I got a wedding schedule. Like, to this day, it wasn't the world's best flinch. It was pretty openly, in front of everyone, a flinch. But does he still feel that way? Right? It's very interesting. And not only is Du Plessis, at least in our minds, a lot better than we were giving him credit for, there's an overarching question mark on where's Izzy? Where is Izzy at? Izzy appears to really not like Dricus. If history is the greatest indicator to the future, if we go back and we look at some very legitimate grudge matches that Adesanya had, he steps to that occasion. That is a circumstance where Izzy does his best. One of the things, if you were to look at the Sean Strickland performance and think that that wasn't Izzy's best performance, well, one thing that was missing was genuine conflict. Sean Strickland was ranked number 6. They hadn't gone outside of the top 5 for a title contender in a meaningful period of time. Like, that wasn't really on Izzy's radar. So when it became Sean, there wasn't a genuine animosity there. To the fact that when Sean got the jump on him and they offered a rematch, Izzy turned it down. He just didn't have, it just wasn't the one. It wasn't personal before, it wasn't personal during, it hasn't become personal now. And that's an ingredient that Izzy needs, and it sure does seem to be there with DDP. But we've also never seen Izzy take a break. We've never seen him say, hey, I need a minute. I'm taking my oars out of the water. I also feel that DDP has gained some major steam. Now, the truth will never come out, or the fighter can never tell it. Like, when Izzy stepped into the ring in front of the world and squared off with DDP, and DDP backed down, there would be nothing shameful about DDP coming out and saying, yes, that's exactly what happened. I realized in that moment I got over my skis. I was surprised and happy for all of the trash I talked to just get the fight with Whitaker. I was somewhat blown away when I beat Whitaker. I am high in this moment of I gotta fight, I want to fight, and now it's propelling me to the ultimate fight. It was too much, too fast. There would be nothing wrong with him coming out and saying it. You guys would even find it interesting. There's just not a fighter who can. There is not a fighter that can ever show or ever admit, and I don't know why. I feel like that's something to overcome, right? Like if you were always confident, you always want to fight, you haven't really done anything. You didn't achieve anything. You didn't fight. If there wasn't a battle and an obstacle in your way, even if it was your own self, it was your own emotion, it was your own confidence and belief in training methods. If none of those were ever in your way, you did not fight. And I know people like this, and they go a really long way. And that's called aggression. Aggression is when it goes both ways. Fighting is when it's coming back at you. So there would never be anything wrong with a fighter saying, yes, that time, that moment, that's what we had to work on. That was the surprise for me. That was something I hadn't seen. That's something I didn't know about. I worked on it. I've overcome it. There would never be anything wrong with that. But the story will never be told the way that I'm telling it. There'll never be a time that Dricus is going to come out and say, yes, when Izzy stepped in there and we're face to face and now there's nothing between us except a plane ticket to Australia and a weigh-in, I decided it wasn't time. And I tell you that because we don't know as much as we think. And I don't know which fighter is going to buckle this time. I know that they know. I know the boys know. They always know. They always have a pretty good idea, even without touching somebody else. I've seen this a number of times. I can just share that with you. As strange as the concept might be. But I've been in practice rooms. And we've worked out for an hour. And I could tell you in specific numerical order who is where in this room. And that room could tell me right back, and we'd have the same list. And as I ran and watched the workout, several of those guys never touched one another. They were in different parts of the room. But I've seen it a number of times where if you put X amount of people in a room and you go for an hour, everybody knows who's where. And you know it too. I could ask you right now who the baddest dude in school was when you were in 8th grade. You all know that answer. But if I ever asked you what tournament, what did you see? Who did you see? You couldn't answer that part of it. If I asked you who was the baddest dude in school your junior year, if I asked you who it was in your senior year, right? Like there's just a way of knowing. And it does very much feel like those tables are starting to turn. It does very much feel like there is a confidence that is starting to grow. And as we get closer and closer to Izzy versus Du Plessis, I'm curious in the training. I'm curious with who's next. DraftKings is giving the nod to Izzy, but you know what? In all fairness, DraftKings always does. I could not tell you a time that DraftKings had Izzy as an underdog. By example, off the top of my head, he was a 6-1 favorite to beat Sean Strickland. By the way, DraftKings, right off the top of my head, Izzy was a 2-1 favorite to beat Alex Pereira. When Izzy lost to Alex Pereira and they booked the rematch, DraftKings returned Izzy to a 2.5-1 favorite. They kept him as a 2.5-1 favorite in a rematch against a guy that they'd already seen him fight. There are not very many times in Izzy's life where anybody questions him. There are not very many times in Izzy's life where a fellow opponent questions him. They generally concede, and they're generally right. Because my theory that the boys know is true. DraftKings pretty good at this game too. And they still feel Izzy has an edge on Du Plessis. But the night that Du Plessis beat Robert Whittaker, Du Plessis was a 3-1 underdog. These two faced off, and the only one that knew, I came out and told you guys, that fight's not happening, at least not in August. I came out and told you guys, as soon as DDP and Izzy faced off, we've lost him. We've lost DDP. I watched it get up and leave. I came and told you instantly, that fight's not going to happen. They're going to need to turn to a backup. They need to turn to Strickland. I told you this, but DraftKings didn't listen, and they put out a line. And it was 3-1. 3-1. For a fight that was scheduled in August of last year and booked into July. 3-1 favorite was Israel Adesanya. But something's changed. Something's changed. Both guys have had a fight. Both guys have had a meaningful rest. The location has changed. Is he still the favorite according to DraftKings, but just barely? And it does feel as though something amongst the fighters themselves, it feels as though something tone-wise is changing.